Okay, so good afternoon. I'm Amy Snyder from the Connect and Communicate Series Planning Committee. I'd like to thank Emily Moras, who is also assisting with running the session today. So thank you for joining us for the Connect and Communicate series presenting Supporting Innovation, Helping Our Users with Patents. This discussion will be recorded and it will be made available to the Pennsylvania Library Association College and Research Division members through the PALA website, as well as sent out to registrants and available on the CRD blog. For this discussion, you will only need a headset or speakers, though it looks like there might be an opportunity to use a mic as well if you have it. We encourage you to ask questions in the chat box at the bottom right throughout this discussion, and we'll either hold those to the end or include them as appropriate throughout the session. We'll also do our best to assist participants with technical issues, so feel free to put those in the chat box as well. This session is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Library Association College and Research Division's Connect and Communicate series. And I'd like to thank the CRD board for supporting the Connect and Communicate initiative and the other Connect and Communicate Planning Committee members, including Dana Kerrigan, Ronalise Sioko, Sarah Pike, and Diane Porterfield. So please feel free to contact any one of our team for information about becoming a PALA member. This project was made possible by a grant from the Institution of Museum and Library Services as administered by the Pennsylvania Department of Education through the Office of Commonwealth Libraries and the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, Tom West, Governor. And finally, I'd like to thank and introduce our presenters for today's event. Over multiple years at the United States Patent and Trademark Office as part of the Patent and Trademark Resource Center program, Laura Liskey completed basic and advanced seminar trainings. She facilitates patent and trademark information literacy to students of entrepreneurship and engineering design courses at Penn State Altoona, and has published a journal on the role of patent research in the startup lifecycle. She provides outreach on the topic of patents at the Altoona Launchbox Business Bootcamp for adult learners and assists inventors and other community members seeking patent information and support. The Patent and Trademark Resource Center librarian for Penn State University since 2007, John Meyer provides research consultation and instruction in patent and trademark information literacy. He has published on patent resources for STEM libraries in a book chapter and a journal article. Based at the University Park campus, John has worked with Schlow Center Region Public Library and the Happy Valley Launchbox on outreach programs. He works with inventors and entrepreneurs across the state in collaboration with the Free Library Philadelphia and the Carnegie Library Pittsburgh. And with that, I'd like to welcome John and Lori and turn the presentation over to them.
Thank you very much, Amy. John and I would like to welcome all of you to our presentation today. We will share our reference and instruction experiences and provide tips on how you too may help your users with patents. But first, we're going to kick things off with a patent trivia. I'm trying to advance my slide. Okay, so let's warm up by looking at fun and interesting patents. If you know what these patents are, please share them in the chat or go ahead and unmute yourself and talk amongst yourselves of what you think these patents might be.
Oh, I see a bunch of guesses for Monopoly in the chat, Lori.
The guesses are rolling in.
Oh, I see a guess about Van Halen.
Yeah. Y'all are pretty smart. Yes, you've got them right. The first image is U.S. patent number 748,626. The patent owner is Elizabeth Maggie, who invented the first version of Monopoly called the Landlord's Game in 1904. I kind of like that original name. And the second image is U.S. patent number 4,656,917. The patent owner is, you guessed it, Edward Van Halen, who invented the guitar support patent in 1987. Excellent. So now we're going to play a little Jeopardy. Let's see if anyone can answer the following Jeopardy question for $1,000. This is Monopoly money, of course. What U.S. patent number 4,756,529 is a generally spherical object with floppy filaments to promote shore capture?
Do, 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 do. You're on the
This
clock.
is in the chat. I see Slinky up there.
I think Alex got it.
This is why I'm not on Jeopardy. Somebody got it?
Yeah, you can advance the slide.
Okay, so this is the Kushball patent. You got that right?
Our own Alex Kausch from Penn State.
Okay, I didn't see the chat up. Okay, great. So now that we're warmed up, we're going to turn to the 3 takeaways from our session to help you prepare for patent reference questions and instruction. John Meyer, our Penn State PTRC rep for over 12 years now, will start us off with who you can go to for help. John?
Thanks, Lori. We're going to start out with a network. So you're going to build up a network of those you can reach out to in case you need additional assistance. You can refer patrons to them, or you can also self-educate using some of these great resources developed around the country. So I'd like to talk a little bit first about the Patent and Trademark Research Center program. It's been mentioned a lot, but then show off the LibGuide we developed at Penn State in particular, though there are many from a lot of the Patent and Trademark Research Center libraries around the country. Finally, some tutorials and guides, including videos that are great for self-education. And finally, some books and resources you can add to your library's collections. Lori, next slide. So the Patent and Trademark program used to be the Patent and Trademark Depository Library program. And much like the Federal Depository Library program, it's an official partnership with the US government, in this case, the US Patent and Trademark Office. And as part of this partnership, we provide training and assistance to the public, which can be anyone who comes in the doors, for patent and trademark information. So we're familiar with patent searching, how to use online information sources, and we often have print collections, though we no longer get patents in print form. So there's Penn State is headquartered at the University Park campus for the Patent and Trademark Research Center, but we have many librarians around the Commonwealth as part of our land grant mission to help support innovation and outreach. One disclaimer, and I put this at the bottom of almost every handout or talk I give, is that we are not lawyers. We cannot give legal advice, and sometimes we've experienced this with health information where we as librarians cannot delve into giving medical or legal advice. And so this might be familiar to you. So what they tell us is we can teach our patrons to use search tools and to conduct their own searches, but we will not perform a legal patent search on behalf of someone. We aren't their lawyer or their attorney. They are not our clients. So that's a pretty important note. I mentioned there were PTRCs across the country. Lori, next slide. We're very lucky in Pennsylvania to have 3 PTRCs. We actually have one in Pittsburgh with the Carnegie Library, and also in Philadelphia with the Free Library. And I work closely with these librarians to refer patrons. We sometimes do geographical boundaries. So in general, in the southeastern part of the state, the Free Library will help those users. And in the southwest area of the state, Carnegie Library of Pittsburgh will help them. So Penn State University Park and our campuses try to cover the rest of the state with regards to helping community and students with patent and trademark seeking information. So feel free to reach out to these if they're close to you geographically. Penn State is the only academic library in the network, but they're very public driven and have a lot of expertise at 2 other locations in Pennsylvania. Next slide, please. So here is the home page, which is a LibGuide for patents at Penn State University libraries. And what I've tried to do here is express an overview to our users who come in, what the PTRC's mission is, but also direct them to the most important tools and resources around patents. We actually use a appointment scheduling system, as you can see under my head next to my buddy Nikola Tesla. You can, I often do meet with students or community members for appointments because the questions can get very in-depth sometimes, but I also answer a lot of questions by email. So the reason I wanted to highlight this guide, and you can come back to it, we're actually going to distribute a PDF handout, which has a lot of these resources as well. You can feel free to distribute that either electronically or in paper to people who may need the help with a PTRC throughout the state. And we're happy to meet online. It doesn't have to be in person. That's especially important now. But it has a tab here on where to go to find patent information. And Lori's going to talk about those in a few minutes, but I'd just like to highlight there's many more than we can go through today. Then we also have a tab on patent offices where they'll actually file. Even though we can't file for them, I often help people who are struggling with the process. There's patent tutorials, which are the self-paced ones, and I'll mention those more in depth soon, as well as inventor support in Pennsylvania. Now is a great time to be an inventor and an entrepreneur. The launch boxes that Penn State has sponsored all over the state, as well as some pro bono legal help you can get through the PA Bar Association or through the Penn State Law IP Clinic is just, it's free, it's invaluable. Next slide, please. So feel free to send people to that LibGuide. There's also some at Georgia Tech and a number of the other PTRCs around the country. So the tutorials are videos and learning objects that you can use, embed, or borrow, or use for your own self-education that are either developed at Penn State, like the one you see in the middle, or the one on the right, which has information from Minnesota, which is a great PTRC, as well as the Patent Office itself, especially around trademarks, but also patents. They do produce their own training and videos, which are available at uspto.gov. So this is a few highlights of those. Next slide. Lori will talk a bit about some of the books for the collection.
Thanks, John. So as you develop your collections, there are some core titles on patents that you will want to purchase. What you're looking at on this slide are the Nolo Press books. These are written by attorneys and they're available in both print and electronic formats. They're very user-friendly. The students and community members in the Altoona area that I work with have given them wonderful reviews and found them very helpful. The books allow the user to walk through them very methodically, step by step, as they learn how to search for patents and also how to file patents with the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. Our own John Meyer has published an open access article in 2015. It's on patent searching for STEM researchers. In addition to core titles, there are free online tools that you'll want to keep at your fingertips. The first is the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office Patent in Full Text Database. So we're going to take a look at that first, and then we'll take a look at Google Patents and then a few other tools that are out there that you can use. So what you're looking at right now is the initial interface page of the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office Patent in Full Text Database. This is the official source for documents. The URL is located at the top of this slide if you're interested in this to explore. It is a government site. You can search full text of patent applications in the right column and patents that are currently granted in the left column. The USPTO is your first stop in your research because while the interface may be a little bit archaic, it is the most up-to-date. You can perform simple keyword searches by going to the Quick Search tab for both the applications and the patents that are currently granted. And from there, you can quickly identify the patent number or the application number. You can identify who the inventor is, their location, the date of their application or patent, and the full history of the documentation behind all of that, as well as the important drawings and figures, as well as the claims. And what the claims do is they methodically go through the entire patent step by step with descriptions of what that patentable object will do. Google Patents is your second stop. And as you would likely expect, the Google Patents is much more user-friendly and easier to navigate than the USPTO. Google scans the patent images and places them up front and center. You can also click on them and then return back to the official USPTO site if you need to do that, which is very helpful at times. The disadvantage of using Google Patents is that the content is not necessarily up to date. So if you start with the USPTO, you can quickly double check Google Patents to see if it's available. And if it is, you can stay in Google Patents where it's much easier to navigate and download different documents or images. But if it isn't, you can stay within the USPTO site. Other tools include your own discovery layer that may include patents at your institution. Many business databases include patent information. At Penn State, for example, we have Derwent Innovation Index and Clavit. As a PTRC location, we provide a guide in the form of a PDF handout that includes additional tools such as ESPASnet. This is the European Patent Office. And Patent Scope, which is the World Intellectual Property Organization, otherwise known as WIPO. Brief descriptions of these tools and many others are available on this guide. And after our presentation, John had already mentioned that we'll make this guide available to you. So with all of this said, take a moment, take a breath, and try to picture yourself at the reference desk. When a random patron comes up to you with that look on their face, and you know right away this is going to be a problem, and they say they need help finding out how to file a patent, what's your first reaction? A lot of people panic, but you're not going to need to panic because you can trust yourself. This really isn't anything new. You've got this and the basic tools and resources to help you and your patrons. While it might take some time to catch on to the jargon and controlled vocabulary and codes that are used, thankfully, all patent information is free. So now I'm going to turn it back to John to share tips on how to include patents in your instruction.
As we're transitioning from that reference and consultation interaction to teaching, I would also like to say that in the many years that I've worked with patrons, be it community or students, the questions are come from a variety of places and have a variety of goals. One example might be someone doing genealogical research, trying to locate an invention that their grandfather had patented hundreds of years ago. And we have those types of resources not only in print, but now online through the HathiTrust public documents. So a lot of this information is good for historical research and genealogical research. But then you also might find that you're helping someone because they are, like Lori said, filing for a patent. And there's only so far we can go. You can definitely send them to a PTRC for help, and also help to just show them the information resources that Lori highlighted. For example, the patent and full text database is daunting to someone who grew up in the Google age, but to a librarian, it's actually very straightforward. It involves controlled vocabulary, Boolean logic. So one of the big ways to make these systems work in your favor is to construct a very specific search strategy. And there are great help pages. I think that you as an information professional can learn a lot just after a few trial searches. So please practice, and it'll be much easier after each interaction with each of these systems. So while we're focused for the next half of the presentation on how to integrate this into teaching, I'd have to say that the reference and consultation, you can probably do a lot more for your users than you think, just because of your familiarity with information systems. And these systems are built on free public government information. So it's actually, Google scans the patents and ingests them, and that's why the information is so freely available, because it's public. So, a lot of this is very, it levels the playing field for independent inventors. You don't have to be a big company. I often say if someone comes in the door, they have less experience than Apple with their legions of lawyers, but they also have the ability to access the same information systems and use some of the same search strategies that benefit those larger companies. So yeah, I'd just like to say that with research consultation, you can also have a big impact on an individual inventor, and you may hear from them in the future thanking you for their success. All right, so let's transition for the second half of this presentation into creating a lesson plan or an approach to teaching. And we're going to break this down in a few ways. First, we're going to start from the end. We're going to look at the audience that we need, develop the learning outcomes we want them to reach, then develop the tools and strategies, right, that will help us reach those outcomes. And then finally, we're going to go into breakout rooms and actually implement this approach in small groups through a scenario. So hopefully you'll walk out of here today with an idea of how you would, in your context, approach a similar scenario or a completely different scenario. So I'll start with some examples. Next slide. All right, so audiences can be in a high variety in all of our. As was mentioned in the intro, I've worked with the local public library. I've even gone into a local retirement community to do presentations on patents and trademarks. And a lot of that is because of the interest in technology, but it's also the amount of innovators and entrepreneurs who are trying to start up a business based on their idea. So you might there might be an audience of the community, there might be an audience of alumni, or it might be an audience of students. So with the prior, it could be a presentation highlighting some historic patents within your institution or in your city. You can actually search through the patent office by city location or inventor name, and that's a great way to have a demonstration of the innovation. So for example, in this picture, you'll see when the US Patent and Trademark Office came to Penn State for our 40th anniversary, they found trademarks associated with Central Pennsylvania, and you can see the Nittany Lion there, among others. But it will be tailored for each audience, and so community audiences I've found can be a great variety of what their needs are and what they might come to expect from a program around patents. So let's talk about undergraduates. Depending on the major or the class, you'll find many different needs around patents. In fact, the request may sound similar. I want you to come to talk to my students about patents. But when you look at each of these audiences separately, they have many different aspects to what they need. So engineering classes, different levels, are often interested in the technology, how it works. A patent is a manual. It can be 10 pages, it can be 1,000 pages. I once helped an Amish farmer, called from a public library in Pennsylvania, find a patent because he wanted to use it as a manual to fix a tractor they had bought, an old tractor. So the engineers often are really thinking of the patent as a journal article almost, or a technical report, right? It's a source of how something works. And so the learning outcome there might be very different than the business students. So oftentimes when I work with business students, they're looking at the value of patents. How much in my business plan should I set aside for getting a patent, using that to protect my intellectual property, and how much is that worth to own this actual idea and to market it and to license it and to do other aspects like that. So each one of these by its audience is going to need different learning outcomes. When you get into the biological sciences and chemistry, they may be also looking at drug patents, the reason that drugs go generic is because the patent expires. And so there's a lot of interesting discussions you can have there around public access. When patent expires after 20 years is a big shift, as well as there's special databases that can search by chemical structure. So, if that gets into that point with a chemistry class, that would be a more advanced need. But in general, a lot of these, if they're focused on startups, they could be broadly categorized as entrepreneurship classes or an entrepreneurship group. You may even have an entrepreneurship minor or major now offered by your university or college. So entrepreneurship itself starts mainly at what is the difference between patents, trademarks, and copyright? What are all the nuances about these types of intellectual property and how do they work? They may only need a little bit of experience in discovering that and for the purpose of doing research on a company or research on a particular patent. And finally, I'd like to address graduate students and law students. So at the point where the class size is smaller, perhaps they're focused on research, patents are a great additional literature to search, because in a lot of STEM areas, over 2/3 of innovations never make it to journal articles that are actually in patents. Maybe like a third will be a journal article and a patent, or a dissertation or a thesis and a patent. And so there's kind of an untapped free information resource with a lot of technology and innovation there for graduate students. And law students in particular, they might have the expertise in the law around this. They may be studying patent law, but remember, you're an information professional. What they need is the information literacy skills, right? They need to be able to reach the point where they're understanding how to leverage the metadata and use that to be more efficient, right? Because everything in the practice of law I've learned is time, and time is money. So if they could be much more effective, it'll be much better in the future. Next slide. All right, so I've tried to break down learning outcomes into this hierarchy, since librarians love hierarchies, but they're not always, it's this straightforward. So I'll just give you 4 examples of learning outcomes that I've seen, and you in teaching for many of your classes likely have developed learning outcomes as well. And I haven't set them out like in the sentences per se, but there's a category I'd like to call awareness of intellectual property, which is sort of the ground floor, right? If you'll talk to the instructor, and you'll realize through the point of the conversation that the students actually don't even know the difference between patents, copyright, and trademark. I've gotten into a class where I'm talking about patent searching, and a student asks, identified the Apple logo as a patent. So I really needed to backtrack that, right? Figure out where the students are, maybe start with an awareness of intellectual property in order to so they can differentiate between the different types. Luckily, we as librarians have a bit edge. We're usually familiar with copyright because of the things we've had to deal with in questions around that. And so when it comes to trademarks and patents, if you can learn enough to differentiate and help guide student study, patents protecting ideas, innovations, trademarks are the brands and the names that are associated with the product. That really will help them with the next stage when they have to then look for those features of a product or a company in an information source. So after they've mastered awareness, now we're talking about the ability to identify and find patents. So this is our bread and butter. So this is often what we try to do is impart to students. How do they look at a patent, identify the main characteristics? So these could be facets like the inventor, the title, or I'll describe later some advanced metadata on particular patents, and the ability to structure a keyword search in an effective way. In fact, patents, when they're full text searchable, are really difficult with keyword searching because of the technical and legal jargon that exists. So what is the difference between a method and a means? It may not mean anything to anyone but a lawyer, but you'll notice in your results, just like with any search, that you'll need to refine and change language as you go. So, I advise my entrepreneurs and inventors to keep a research log, especially of what they've searched, because it will allow them to do better. And I'll go through a keyword and brainstorming activity often with patent searching because it's very difficult. If someone's searching apps, they don't realize that it's spelled out as application or computer program in the patent itself, rather than app. All right, so what if they've mastered that and it's at that point? What if they need to find a patent based on a product that they've developed or a similar idea? So this is less like a known item. So there's not a known item that's used by um, to easily find in our information sources. Now we actually have to broaden the searches, right? We have to guide them into, once you find one, you can actually jump to others through citation searching. There's citations in patents that you can use. There are ways to search by company name or inventor. You can do search on Elon Musk. So there's ways to leverage that's sort of the next level, go beyond keyword searching into what you'd call field searching, right? So for these fields and parts of patents are very powerful. And finally, I'd like to get to the point where I often don't do in classes, but I'll do in one-on-one consultations, advanced patent searching with specific facets like classifications. So patents have a number code assigned to them, which are in a hierarchy of buckets. So a classification is like a million types of patents, but you can get into subclasses and groups and subgroups where there might only be 100 patents in the world who are in that small code. And so knowing those codes and mastering those codes are what allow patent attorneys, advanced patent searchers to search very quickly and thoroughly, because these codes are assigned by the patent offices, the authoritative bodies, they're able to be consistently applied across countries, across languages, and across years. You know, they go back and they historically reclass things over time. Oh, and this, to explain the image, um, it's often true the same way with searching. What is patentable is more valuable if it's balanced. So if you claim in your patent that you invented email, it's too broad, and you won't get a patent for that. Or if you claim something in your patent that's too narrow, like I invented only this specific thing, well, then if someone caught the slight variation, you're not protected from that idea. So you want your invention to be in that sweet spot. Next slide, Larry. All right, here's my last slide of examples before we'll be able to get in some breakout rooms and discuss how to develop these strategies on your own. So I'm going to start with that focus on concepts and vocabulary. Over time, I've evolved the way I've taught away from demonstration in the classroom and more towards getting students to master the concepts. And so because the terminology in patents is kind of archaic and verbose, as we mentioned, so you can't search company, you have to search the assignee, the person who owns the patent. And so once you impart a lot of this vocabulary or concepts, again, am I going to be wanting to find a trademark? Am I going to be looking for copyright protection because I'm music, or am I looking to patent a device or a process? And then I can get a patent. Once you get, spending more time on concepts and vocabulary and discussion, I found is very helpful to getting students where they can enact later steps. So I've tried to elevate that. I also try to use relevant examples. So this one on the right is my favorite. This is an iPhone. Maybe I need to update it to a newer version, but you can see a lot of recognizable things in this picture that are trademarks, like the Apple logo, the iPhone name. There's copyright, because I mean, if you have music on there, you have pictures, right? Anything you can use for intellectual property examples. But it's also great for patents, because there's patents you can see, like that camera, right? Or the touchpad, but there's ones that you also can't really see, like the microchips in there, the antenna, or the software. You can actually patent software. So things that are running that you might not think of as patentable are in this device. So I always mention is trade secrets, because of Apple's when the phones were locked down, they wouldn't reveal the encryption. You know, there's a lot of different aspects of that in just this one thing. And Lori gave me this great idea where they can get that out and, you know, get their phone out and sort of look at it and try to figure out what is a patent, what is the company sort of using in the device? It's not like the old days where you could pick up a hammer and it might say patent and then the number on it, because there's just so many. In this one thing, there's dozens of patents owned by various companies. So that's a way to get engagement with the subject matter, is to have it be relevant. But the other way is get the room talking. So I mentioned the idea of getting something out, maybe passing it around, but you can also ask for input or a quiz to sort of gauge where the students are in understanding these concepts. There's actually always burning questions about patents. Be prepared for them. Always have like maybe some trivia like we did at the beginning. Mainly, you'll have to say, I don't know, or maybe. I even do that after years, because there's always some maybe legal questions coming up, or I've heard of this case, and you sort of have to be like, no, that'd be great to do more research on, like the Apple Music versus the Beatles. Apple Records versus Apple Computers. Like it's not aging well, because it's been a long time since it happened, but they had like a trademark lawsuit going on. So there's oftentimes, things in the popular culture that you can point to, and find some examples to get the room talking. If you think of any of those like that have happened in the last few months or so, you can throw those in the chat, because I'm always looking for like some more, let's say, relevant or more like contemporary examples of these patent lawsuits. There was actually an NPR episode about patent trolls that I was pointing to people to for a long time, because it was explaining how companies will just patent a whole bunch of things and then sit on it and just sue people who try to produce the devices. So they're not really adding anything to the economy or to producing anything, but they're like, very litigious, and they make a lot of lawsuits. And so I really appreciated that, because I could say, hey, go listen to this NPR story before the class, go read this news article that just came out in order to prepare. And so that's my last point. Flip the classroom, figure out ways where you can have the students ready. I even do this for my research consultations now, which is the ability to give them a 30-minute video or 20-minute video I've done for classes introducing concepts, or a 5-minute video on how to do a certain search. And that will get them ready to talk about, their specific case. So they already know all the previous information and are prepared to either work on an assignment in the classroom or to have a more active discussion, because they've already they're not learning at that point as much vocabulary and concepts. Now they're going to be applying that in an environment where they'll be able to sort of get feedback immediately, and that type of approach. So those are my experiences and ideas. Lori, before we go on to the breakout rooms, do you want to talk a little bit about some of the things you've done in classes and with other groups?
I would, thank you. In Altoona, I typically will be doing patent instruction with engineering design courses. And you're right, they're more interested in the technology behind the product that they're proposing. And at the same time, they have to look at the prior art in the business world, because they go hand in hand. If they're focusing exclusively on prior art and engineering, they're losing a major component if they don't also explore the business end of it to see what is currently on the market. Is it being sustainable in the market, or is it failing? So they need to look at financial profiles and other reports in the business industry to see how these products are sustaining over time. I also go into entrepreneurship classes where the focus is very different. It's not so much about the technology and the history behind it as much as it is, how can I get something out there? How can I take an innovative idea that is beyond what somebody else has ever dreamed of and get it out there in the world? So they're typically more interested in the process of how do I get the patent? Where do I go to for free assistance and things like that? So with both of them together, it's really energetic. I love it. And occasionally we get the community members coming in as well. And it's fascinating. I've helped people all over the state that somehow find their way to Penn State Altoona to get help, whether if they're just looking for those NOLO books or if they're needing to sit down with me to really go through, say, the USPTO site to understand some of the controlled vocabulary so that they can work on it independently.
All right, so I'm going to set us up to get ready to go into breakout rooms. Lori, next slide. And so I would like to, we'll go into each of these as well and try to copy this information into the chat. But if you could like make note of some of the scenarios here, and maybe the first part of, there'll be about 4 people in each group. You can take turns introducing yourself, your name, your library, you know, and what you might think is the reason for you came here today. What is the most relevant audience or need for patent and trademark help at your library? And then choose somebody to sort of guide the discussion, somebody could step up and speak up for this classroom scenario. So it could be an online classroom, it could be in-person classroom, but you've been asked for a first-year seminar in engineering. The instructor wants students to pick a company, you know, Apple, Tesla, find one of their patents and write a short summary of what it does. So very similar you may find to an English 15 class around or English introductory class around a journal article. So you're summarizing. So within the group, talk about your strategies you might use to reach that learning outcome in particular, or that assignment, and some of the tools and examples you would use. You know, it doesn't, you can use the variety of the examples I did, or speak from your experience, what you found is the most successful. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to assign the breakout rooms, and then when I'll close them in about 10 minutes. And so that should give you enough time, hopefully, to come out with some of the advice from your colleagues and a few new connections when it comes to this. So get ready to go in 3, 2, 1. Welcome back, everyone, from the breakout rooms. Lori, do you have the slides still available to share? We're going to use the last 4 minutes or so to have open questions and answer. If you want to put them in the chat, or feel free to unmute your microphone since we have that ability. I hope you enjoyed the breakout sessions.
Can anybody hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, my name's Karen Yemla, and I'm a librarian at Mercyhurst University up in Erie. One of the databases we have that is supposed to be good at being able to give patent information and legal information is LexisNexis's Nexis Uni. And for some reason, sometime last year, I realized that in its company dossier or dossier area, like they have this link that's supposed to go to its page, each company's page of patents and trademarks, and that link hasn't worked for a year. And like I contacted them about the problem, and they said that it was some kind of technical issue, but they never got back around to saying if they fixed it or not. And I tried it recently, and it still didn't work. So is anybody else having any problems with Nexis Uni regarding this type of search? Because I have, but I don't really know what else to say about it.
I'd love to hear if on the chat or on audio if anyone's had that problem. From my experience, a lot of companies, Elsevier and many stick patents as an add-on because it is sort of free for them, and then they can say they've added something to their product, but they don't give it a lot of emphasis. Right, it's not one of the main developmental areas for them. So complaining to them might help, but it's not usually a priority among their
and hence
the parts
the lack
of their
of
product.
support.
Yeah, I didn't know that existed, but I'll definitely try it now. And if it doesn't work, then I'll complain too.
Oh, thanks.
Thanks for coming, Karen.
Thanks.
So as we wind down, I invite everyone to think about your observations or any other questions you might have. We have just a couple minutes left.
So while you're thinking about that and potentially putting some things in the chat box, I'm just going to point out that I put a survey link for the session in the chat box in case you need to head out. I want to make sure to also thank Lori and John for presenting for us. And just a reminder that this recording will be made available to PALA members next week through the website. And if you're not a PALA member and you're interested in becoming one, feel free to reach out to me or anyone on the team. Same thing, if you are interested in presenting in a future session or if you have ideas for a future session, feel free to reach out and let us know. But yes, feel free to put anything in the chat box. I see lots of thank yous.
Yeah, you can always email Lori and I, reach out to us. We're really excited to have more people involved, across universities and colleges, because this is really where we can have a lot of impact on not just students' lives, but the economy of Pennsylvania. It's exciting times.
Definitely is. And depending on where you're located, also take advantage of the other PTRCs in Pennsylvania. And if you would like to use those PTRCs, John or I can get you the name of the representatives.
Do you have like set boundaries, or is it like if you're generally in this area, you contact this group and generally in that area?
No, there's no boundaries. You can reach out to anyone you wish, but if you wanted to visit in person, it might logistically be easier to go to one location or the other.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm just posting lots of thank yous in the chat box.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for coming.
Thank you all.